can we get companies to install EV chargers at their offices so that when employees come, they can actually charge there, which I think is a great benefit. But everyone always gets super excited when the government gets involved because they think there's like free money on the table, there are subsidies, and we can take advantage of that, and that's great. And I know how good that is for our customers and how good that is for us when that happens. But the problem is the hangover effect. The government and the utility companies have kind of been two peas in a pod for the last couple of decades. And likewise, you have companies, when you give too many subsidies, companies come out of nowhere, they don't install well, they're not managed well, they're not run well. And then when the subsidies stop, the companies realize, oh, I don't actually have a functioning business. They go out of business, and it just creates this massive hangover.
Hi, I'm Laís. I'm the head of operations in Sunhero. I normally don't do podcasts, so bear with me. But today we're going to interview Chris, our founder, one of our founders, and I think it's going to be super fun. So hang on there and enjoy. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Laís. How's it going?
Good. You?
Yeah. Pretty good.
So welcome.
Thank you. It's nice to be on the other side of the table.
Yeah, it's nice to be on this side,
Yeah,
interviewing my boss. I think this is going to be fun.
Sure.
Okay, so my first question is, what's your background?
Well, my background is probably professionally, I'm an entrepreneur. I think that's my professional background. So I founded my first company in 2008. I spent a little bit of time before that working in a corporate job, and I pretty quickly realized that was not going to be my life going forward. So I quit that, started my first company, and ever since then I've been kind of in entrepreneurship, either as a founder or I did a couple of things where I was a very early employee also at companies that were really small. Mm-hmm. And in 2020 I became a father.
Oh, nice.
And I really had like a very cliche feeling of that my daughter was going to ask me someday, like, Dad, what are you doing? Like, why are you working so much? Why are you traveling all the time? And I felt that I needed an answer that has something positive within it. So I decided to found Sunhero together with Stefan, who I'd known for quite a bit at that time. We worked together in my previous company. Mm-hmm. Because I felt that it's one of the most impactful things that I could be doing with my time. Not just for kind of helping people transition their lives to electricity and solar and everything, but I really believe in kind of the power of the consumers. You know, I think there's a lot of big oil companies, big electricity companies that are like, trying to put a lot of blame for climate change on consumers. And I don't think that that's the right thing to do. But I do think that people who come to us, they come with the idea of, how much money can I save? What's the return on investment? And all those things are great. But then a year down the line, you talk to the customers and they don't talk about money anymore. They talk about the value that they're creating for society, the small thing that they're doing to make things better. And that was always my hypothesis, that ultimately we change consumers' minds and we get them to start thinking more about energy consumption and where's that energy coming from. And it kind of changes not just their own consumption, but I think it changes how they vote, how they maybe consume other things, and just creates more consciousness, but in a positive way, rather than blaming them for climate change, which I think is not the right approach. So that's how I came to Sunhero, essentially.
But did you work in like engineering or with electricity before?
No, not at all. I am the first person in my family who was not an engineer. So my grandfather was a mechanic, my father was an engineer. All of my uncles on like all sides of the family, they were all kind of in that world as well. A lot of them in like mechanical engineering, some in electrical engineering. And so I come from a DIY household. I always kind of installed things myself. My father had purchased a kind of a small cabin in the woods in Sweden, which was off-grid, which didn't have any electricity. And then over the years, we kind of started to put electricity into it, first by wires, and we charged them with brought car batteries from kind of civilization that were charged, and we used that to like charge small devices. Then we eventually upgraded to solar. Then after my dad had passed, I upgraded to a bigger solar system myself, and I did all of that always by myself. No electrician has ever looked at that. The structure on the roof that we have there is actually made out of wood, and the house does not have enough inclination, so we actually put the panels up during the summer, like we changed the structure, and then when we go away for the winter, we put it there. It's not safe. We should not be doing that. It's not good.
Yeah, I'd say that, like, probably to our clients, don't do it yourself.
No, do not do this yourself. It's absolutely not the right way to do it. I spent probably a few months just like watching YouTube videos and reading blogs about, how to. I also dimensioned the system myself. Like I did, purchased all the components, put them in the car, drove there, did all that myself. So I don't have an engineering background. I'm not an engineer. I should not be doing that. I'm also afraid of heights, so that also really doesn't help. Luckily, the house isn't very tall. It's just one story, but it's already at the limit of what I feel comfortable with in terms of like being on a roof. So I do not have that background, but I've kind of always had it in my family. My cousins, they all kind of work on cars and fix things and get motors to run, and I always say that my cousin is a little bit like James Bond. You can put him into any motorized vehicle and he can just drive it, and so that's kind of the family that I come from. But this is my first kind of engineering type of company that I've been involved in.
Okay, nice. And I've heard the story many times, but I'm sure our clients have not. Like, why did you thought about Sunhero along with Stefan? No, I know you guys were friends, but how was the beginning of
Yeah, so we were friends, but we met through work. So we initially worked together, and it always worked really well. We're in some ways quite similar, but also extremely different. I mean, you know this working with both of us. We're very different. But it's always kind of been a very good working relationship, because we've always found ways to kind of resolve conflicts and then move forward. And when I had this idea of Sunhero, which was again like really driven by my daughter being born and the desire to do something with climate change, I thought, Stefan is kind of the number one. He was the first person I called when I had the idea, and I told him, like,
how did you convince him?
Stefan and I got together at my kitchen table, and I said, Stefan, we should rent out solar systems in Nigeria. And he said, are you insane? And I said, probably, yeah. Have you ever been to Nigeria? No. Have you? No. None of us has ever been there. Do we really know that much about solar? Yeah, well, I built this half-legal off-grid thing, so of course I know something about solar. I obviously didn't know anything about solar. And from there, we kind of developed the plan. The reality is I never wanted to launch the company in Nigeria. I always wanted to launch it here in Spain, because I always felt that Spain is the best market for this in Southern Europe. But I also am a storyteller, and I wanted to catch Stefan's attention, and I told him, like, let's found a company in Spain. It's maybe not as exciting as let's do something crazy in a country that none of us have ever been to.
Yeah, so Nigeria was kind of like the catch, and then Stefan said no, but Spain, yeah, that's way better.
It's a better idea. Yeah, exactly.
Might go for it.
Yeah, exactly. So that's how it started. And then the thing is that, and I still find that super strange. Like, we got the company off the ground like a month later. We had founded the company, and then we started hiring people here in Spain. And this is a perfect kind of Stefan story to me. It's my favorite Stefan story of all time, is that we landed very quickly on the name Sunhero. We wanted a name that is English. We wanted it to be something with sun, but we also wanted to put the customer in the middle. But we didn't have the domain. So the domain name sunhero.com was owned by someone else. And the thing is, when you try to negotiate to buy a domain name, you want to look as small as possible, not as big as possible, because you basically want to say, oh, this is just, I think we came up with some stories, like it's a personal blog project that we want to get going, and like I'm writing something about, like, it was just a weird story just to make yourself look a little bit smaller. But at the same time, we wanted to hire people, we wanted to get going. So Stefan said, well, that's easy, we just invent another company name. And we just put up job ads, and it's easy problem. So we invented this company. I think it was called Albasol. We also did not have that domain, but we didn't care about that. We just put up job ads for Albasol, and then we started doing interviews. And this was during COVID. So Stefan was sitting in Berlin. I was sitting at my in-laws. My in-laws live outside of Munich in Germany, so I was sitting in their basement. And I remember, for instance, the call we had with Manu, who's our head of finance. And it was one of the first calls we had. And we said, look, I mean, first of all, neither of us are based in Spain right now. Stefan doesn't speak any Spanish. Neither of us has ever done anything with solar. The name of the company that you applied for is not the name of the company. The company itself as a Spanish legal entity does not exist yet. But can you quit your good paying job at where you have benefits and things work to join this insanity? And he said, yeah, it sounds really interesting. So we hang up the phone and we call each other and was like, what's wrong with this guy? Like, how can you be this insane? But ironically, I just a couple of days ago looked at I think a picture from our first offsite that we did, and like 2/3 of the people are still here.
That's amazing.
So many of the people that are now talking to clients every day and helping clients every day they were there already from the beginning. And frankly, a lot of the people that aren't here anymore were like interns or people that just moved on to better things. And so just being able to kind of get that first group together, and we got it together really quickly and we got things off the ground really quickly. We got it off the ground, I think, faster than we had anticipated. In terms of clients actually saying, yeah, I want to buy this. So we said, okay, now we really need to figure out how to build it, which in the beginning we had absolutely no idea, but I think we figured it out pretty fast.
What were like the qualities that you're looking for when we were hiring these first people,
I mean, I think one thing that like sets us apart is that everyone who's here, I believe, is here for the right reasons, and the reasons is we want to have the positive impact on the clients. I think when I look at every proposal that I see, when I listen to the engineers talking to the sales guys, the question is always like, how do we make this better for the clients, and how do we make this product actually work for customers, and how do we keep the best interest at heart? And I mean, these discussions that we have every day about like, yeah, we're choosing an option that is better for the client. And then someone says, yeah, but the client doesn't even understand that. And we say, yeah, but we're still choosing the option that's better for the client. We don't always do the best job at communicating that, but I firmly believe that everyone who's here has that kind of motivation at heart. And then obviously when you're early stage, you want to get people on board who have a lot of like skill flexibility and mental flexibility. And are not afraid of just kind of picking up the phone, calling someone, trying something, and if it doesn't work, you call someone else and you try it again, or you say, I'll call you back, you think about it, and you iterate, you come back to them. So a lot of the people that we had on early had that quality. A lot of people that we're bringing on now still have those qualities of just picking up the phone and calling someone and not overthinking things. And I think that's absolutely essential.
Nice. So moving a little bit now and like looking to Sunhero's future now, my question to is how do you see the market right now and what are the challenges?
Yeah, so I think it's worth noting where we are right now. Like we're recording this at the end of October. It's been like yesterday we saw the news of the insane floods in Valencia and the whole southern Spain, of how affected it's been. And I think we need to be absolutely crystal clear that like climate change is not something for the polar bears and it's not 15 years away. Like it's affecting us right now. Now, of course, the other things create those flash floods, and maybe there are other things that we could have done to prevent that. And like putting solar panels on roofs is not directly going to change that, but it's absolutely crystal clear that we have to act. That's one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is that if we look at all of Europe needs to transition to electrical energy and wants to do that. And we need to find a way to produce that energy in the cleanest and cheapest possible way. Yeah. And we need that to drive all our industrial processes, all of our mobility, all of our households, all the businesses. Everything needs clean electricity. And Spain is just the best country in Europe to produce mass amounts of clean electricity. It just is. We have so much sun here, so much space here, so much wind here. Like, we've actually a pretty good grid in terms of infrastructure. So I really kind of believe in Spain as the entryway to European energy independence in the next 10, 15 years. And I believe for the Spanish economy that energy production, not just electricity, but all the derivatives of electricity, clean water, green hydrogen, agriculture, battery production, data centers, all of that can be kind of a really massive second piece of the Spanish economy next to tourism, which has always been a key part of the Spanish economy. So I put those two things together, and I can only see that the future is very sunny and is very positive. Now, renewables are challenging. Like, they absolutely are challenging. They don't always produce the energy when you want it to. It's kind of easy to model out in the long run, and the averages always work out. But in the short term, you're not in control of the clouds. People use electricity in the mornings when the sun isn't shining, at night when the sun isn't shining. Like, it's not a perfect solution for that. And it's a massive transition in terms of like where the electricity is coming from. And that's a big challenge for the Spanish government in terms of the legislation. Where do you put the investments? And it's a massive challenge for everyone who's in our industry. I think, ironically, it's not a massive challenge for the individual customer. Whether or not he's a business or a private individual, ultimately, it's a reasonably simple thing to do because it's so profitable. Mm-hmm. And the discussion is only about how profitable it is, but it almost always is profitable for the customer to make this transition. So it really comes down to a question of, how much do I believe that my energy needs are going to shift into the future? How much do I believe in electrification? And that's a discussion we have with customers every day, and there are different outcomes there, but that's one part. And the second part is, how much investment can I make? How much do I have to actually make this investment? And that's something the customer knows. But if you solve those two problems, the rest are kind of like operational details that we can take care of, and are things that we can explain to them. And what's the best technology, and what does legalization and permitting work, and how do we actually get it on the roof, and how do we do all that? Like, we can do all of that. That's easy. That's our job. So for the customer, it's actually a pretty easy decision.
Do you feel that there has been a change in how the customer sees PV here in Spain, and how has this changed along the years that Sunhero has been operating here?
Yeah, so I do think, obviously the technology itself isn't all that new, and it hasn't actually changed all that much in the last couple of years, but the buyers have changed. And if you look back, maybe 10 years, Spain actually had taxes on these installations, which makes no sense. And so you basically had real, I would call them eco-warriors, that said, I don't care about the taxes, I still want to make this investment. That then, when the taxes went away and subsidies came, people said, I see a way to make money here, I see a way to save money here, so it kind of brings in a new type of clientele. And I think now the wave that's coming are people who say, I actually believe in electrification. I believe in running more in my house on electricity than just my TV and my lights. Mm-hmm. I believe that I can cook with electricity, that I can heat with electricity and drive with electricity. And if I then produce that electricity very cheaply and in a very green way, then I'm super autonomous and I made a great investment. So I think with every phase, you get a different type of customer. Obviously for us, because we have a pretty big customer segment that's not Spanish speaking, they are often different. So customers who come from the US or Northern Europe, from the Netherlands, from Germany, from Sweden, we have a lot of customers from those markets. They often have already made this investment at home, or they know people who've made this investment at home, and they come to Spain for the weather, for the climate, for the people, for the food, for the beautiful country that it is, and they look around and say, what are you guys doing? I live in the middle of Sweden, and it's dark, and
everybody has panels.
And everybody has panels, and what are you guys doing? This doesn't make any sense. Yeah. And they're right, it doesn't make any sense. So for those customers, it's actually a different discussion. For those customers, I think it's more the discussion about but managing the Spanish bureaucracy, how do I do all of that? That's not super trivial. So I think, and that's something where they turn to us because they understand that that's something that we can help them with.
Yeah, that's nice. So, well, I don't know if our clients know, but we recently started on doing some Aerotermia heat pumps installation as well. And how do you think this market is right now here in Spain, and how do you see it growing, or do you see it growing?
Yeah, I think what's interesting with all of these markets, whether or not it's panels, batteries, EV chargers, heat pumps, kind of all those markets, it requires two sides of the coin. You need the customer who wants it, and you need the companies who are able to provide a good solution and actually install a good solution. Yeah. And for everything that is solar related and battery related, that market on the supply side, on the installer side, is so well developed. Like, to be honest, of course, we're happy about every customer who comes to us, but frankly, there are so many companies out there that can provide decent solutions. People who want something higher quality, maybe they come to us. People who maybe are not that quality conscious, they go somewhere else. That's totally fair. In the heat pump market, that supply side does not exist yet at the quality and the scale that we need it to. So I think that market is coming, and we see that from Northern Europe, that heat pumps are just miraculous tools to create a lot of hot water heating and potentially even cooling. And they are just so incredibly energy efficient. It is such a good investment if you can make it, but you also need to find that partner to do it. So I think that market is just going to take a little bit longer to get here, but ultimately it's a market that will come to Spain as well. And even people who live in southern Spain, they still need some heating during the winter. They still often, I just spoke to a customer yesterday who was talking to me about he wants to heat his pool. Because yeah, sure, June, July,
Amazing.
August, amazing, but he wants to use his pool in the winter as well, and at least through November and December. And then the heat pump is an amazing tool to increase the temperature.
Which is actually a good idea, because you have sun, you know? What you don't have is like the temperature.
Exactly.
It, so.
It's still warm outside, you're still producing a lot of electricity, you combine that, awesome, perfect solution. So there are these use cases that are kind of really, really appealing to customers, and that's something that I do see coming. And I do see the heat pump market in Spain evolving as well. But we need both the demand and supply, so it's going to take a little bit longer than it is for solar.
Okay, great. You also touched a little bit on the EV chargers as well, like in electric cars. I know that you own one. How was your experience, and how do you see like adoption in Spain?
Yeah, I think with electric cars, the reality is that almost everyone who buys one would never go back to a non-electric car. But at the same time, the availability of vehicles is not high enough yet, especially kind of across price points. And some of the best ones actually have very long delivery times, but they're also some of the most expensive ones. At the lower price point, maybe you can get them, but the quality isn't quite there, and you don't have the kind of the breadth of options that you have in combustion engines. I'm super happy with my EV. I'm super happy that I can charge my EV essentially for free. I charge it during the day when I'm not using it. I just plug it in, and the way that the app works, that Sunhero is installed, is I just charge on excess solar. So basically, whenever my battery is full, whenever I'm not using the electricity at home and the sun is shining, that electricity, instead of before it gets injected into the grid, it gets charged. It charges my battery, and that just works really, really well. I've never had any what's called range anxiety issues. I've never had that. I've driven the EV in Spain, in Italy, in Germany, in Austria, in Sweden. I've never had any issues in any of those countries. So I understand where kind of the hesitancy comes from the customer side, but if you actually experience it, you realize that this actually just kind of works really well, and the acceleration is super nice, and they're very quiet. And at the end of the day, I am German, but I'm not a car freak, so I don't really care that much. It's not that of an emotional thing for me.
Sound of the motor.
I don't care about the sound of the motor all that much. I don't, actually the EV that I own is the first car that I've ever bought in my entire life.
Oh, nice.
So I've rented cars before, I've loaned cars before, but I've never owned a car myself. And the EV that I drive is the first one. So I'm not the most emotionally attached EV. For me, it's a way to get from A to B, and it does that really, really well.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. Yeah. I still own a hybrid. I don't have a charging point at my flat, and I think that's a problem for a lot of people right now. And I think also, like, if you go in the streets now, you can see more. Like, we live in Barcelona. There's a lot of more options to charge your car. But do you think that's something that the government still needs to push a little bit harder?
Yes. I think so, because I think it's a typical market that just needs a little bit of a push. When it actually starts going and you actually have enough people who drive them and you have enough charging infrastructure, and as you said, not just along the highways, but can you charge your car in Barcelona at night, and you can leave it there for 6 hours for the night for it to be full in the morning, so that when you drive to work, it works. Can we get companies to install EV chargers at their offices, so that when employees come, they can actually charge there, which I think is a great benefit. But we need a couple of little pushes around the edges. Once that all starts happening, then you'll see it just starts to roll. And I think that's something where we do need a little bit of help from the government. And I think that's money well worth invested. Because in the long run, it just makes the air cleaner, it makes everything quieter, it ultimately gives a lot more flexibility to the economy, and it kind of pushes us in the right direction, not just for climate reasons, but primarily also just for quality of life reasons.
Yeah, I think it makes sense, right? Like here in Barcelona, we can see that a lot of streets are becoming peatonales, and just for people walking, and I think that's amazing. And the less cars that are polluting, then also means better quality for all of us. So
absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's the way. So like still on the government topic, what else do you feel like the government should be doing or should extend his help to the energy companies or to the sector in general?
Well, I think there's really two things. The first is they need to get out of bed with the big utility companies. The government and the utility companies have kind of been two peas in a pod for the last couple of decades. And that needs to stop, because the utility companies primarily are just focused on maintaining the status quo. They're not really trying to find better solutions for their customers. And that's something that needs to stop. The government has been subsidizing that, and that's something that needs to stop. It needs to be phased out. The second thing is they should get out of the renewables business. They should stop giving subsidies. They should stop putting red tape and just let the market run its course. Because fundamentally, these technologies work if the government doesn't get involved. Everyone always gets super excited when the government gets involved, because they think there's like free money on the table, there are subsidies, and we can take advantage of that, and that's great. And I know how good that is for our customers and how good that is for us when that happens. But the problem is the hangover effects are just too big. Like the party is just not good enough for the hangover that it creates down the road. And could you design a really smart subsidy scheme that has long-term the right incentives, and it kind of creates a smoother ride? Theoretically, you can. It's actually not even that difficult, but I just don't trust the government to do it. So the government, when they want to win votes, they want to win an election, they over-subsidize things. Then once the funds run out or they've changed their minds, they turn it off, and it just creates this massive hangover where customers say, I'm not willing to make this investment because it's not as profitable as it would have been had I made it in the past. And then I just get this regret, and then I'm not willing to make that investment. And likewise, you have companies, when you give too many subsidies, companies come out of nowhere, they don't install well, they're not managed well, they're not run well. And then when the subsidies stop, the companies realize, oh, I don't actually have a functioning business. They get out of business, and it just creates this massive hangover. And that's exactly the phase that we're kind of going through right now as a market, where the subsidies, there used to be really, really interesting subsidies in 2022, especially, created a lot of companies, created a lot of boom, a lot of customers that are still, in some cases, waiting for their money, which is absolutely absurd. We're now at the end of 2024, and customers are still waiting for their money. And likewise, this, on the flip side, is the companies, many of them are struggling because they found out that they weren't run well and they weren't managed well, and now they're kind of not able to sustain the business. So what do we have then? We don't have the customers, and we don't have the companies anymore that are providing services. So the government may as well have not been involved in this at all.
Yeah, I think that you've touched a few points that are like actually pain points for our clients in general. No, like you talked about these companies that are no longer in the market. You talked about, like subsidies, that it's like we deal with subsidies every day, and sometimes we have like customers that are not so happy with how it's going because the government, it's not clear about what are the documents that we have to submit in some of the cases, when you have to submit them, how you need to submit them. There are a lot of changes now in regulations and documents and everything, and those are like pain points that we all know in this sector. Would you say, like, what would you say are like the main ones for the clients?
I mean, the subsidies are a massive pain point for the customer because the regulation is so intransparent, and you have subsidies on different levels of government. Obviously, for an English-speaking client, everything gets even more complicated because they get the messages in Spanish and Catalan and maybe somewhere English down the road. But calling to your local authority or calling the government, that's a real hurdle if you don't speak the language. So I think that is a big pain point for customers still. And just even understanding what subsidies are available and how they work and what's realistically is the timeline for them to see any funds. And to be honest, I think in many cases, especially in phases where a lot of subsidies are granted very quickly or there are very theoretically big piles of money out there, then you have this massive run and everyone is just overloaded. The customers are trying to run after their subsidies. The government is overloaded because they get way more interest than they thought they would. And there are so many companies out there, and just the whole system just kind of turns into just a massive traffic jam, and everyone has to wait for a really long time. And that just creates a lot of disappointment. So unfortunately, I understand where the customer is coming from, and that's exactly why my appeal to the government is just leave us alone, because we'll figure it out. We can explain to customers that this investment makes sense even without the subsidies. And if we have some smaller subsidies for things that maybe don't make that much sense yet. We talked about EVs, maybe batteries is also one where there is an economic case for batteries, but it's not quite as clear cut as it is for solar. So maybe we need a little bit of a subsidy there, and we can do that, and we can kind of find processes around how to manage that well. But ultimately, the less the government gets involved, the better it is.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Like moving on the subject still of like pain point for the customers, you also touched about quality in the beginning. Why do you feel quality is so important, and why do you push it so much inside Sunhero for it?
Yeah, so I think it's worth taking a step back and just understanding how difficult this decision is for customers. There's so many layers of complexity here. The first is that everyone is making this decision for the first time. Like, statistically, nobody's buying their second, third, or 10th PV system. So people are not that familiar with the technology. Oftentimes, they don't know people very well who've made this decision. Maybe they know someone, but it's not as other decisions. The second thing is, it is a reasonably large investment.
Yeah.
Typical investment is, somewhere between 10 and 30,000 euros, depending on what you're doing. That's a decent amount of money. And even if it has a pretty strong financial return, and even if I would argue it's probably the best way that you can invest that amount of money, it's still a lot of money. So it's not a decision that you take kind of like on the subway and you like an Amazon order and you do it on your phone. Like, and you want a good thing there. And then it's a long-term decision. It's a system that really pays off when you run it 10, 15, 20 years. And the panels are on roofs. So that creates another level of complexity, which is that I, as a customer, I can see them, but I can't touch them because I shouldn't climb on my roof. And so they're there, but I can't quite grasp them. They're a little bit elusive in that sense. Mm-hmm. And then in order to mount them on the roof, we need to put structures on the roof. Sometimes we need to drill holes in the roofs. Those things need to be done well, because if they aren't done well, we don't want panels flying around. We don't want short circuits. We don't want water damage. We don't want any of those things. And doing that well is absolutely important. And I think customers in 10, 15 years, they will be happy if we've done it well. I understand that they cannot judge that quality, mm-hmm. because they cannot be on the roof and because they don't know enough about how to mount things and how to install things. But I just firmly believe that if we do it poorly, it will come back to haunt us and it will come back to haunt our customers. So I'd rather do it well, and we'd rather do it well the first time around if we can. And I think fundamentally it always comes back to this idea is like, are we solving for the customer needs, or are we solving to make a shortcut? And my philosophy is just, in the long run, you're just better off if the customer will remain happy for the long run. And it just creates less headaches down the road.
Yeah, for sure. I know that one thing that we've been working a lot with our engineering team also is like, try to get solutions that you can allow us to monitor your system now, online and real time and etc. And for heat pumps, we're doing the same, which is not easy to find providers out there that allow you to do that. But for us, that's super important, that we can help the client also to see what's happening in his installation without having to be there present, because that. Like if you live here in Barcelona, then maybe it's a 15-minute drive. But if you live, I don't know, in Cerdanyola, then it's like 2-3 hours, and it's a bit more complicated.
Yeah.
So what do you think about this? Like, what do you think about this solution and the tech involved?
I think there's a lot of role that the technology can play in monitoring systems. And I think that's also something where we haven't seen the perfect solution yet. I mentioned earlier that I can charge my car on excess production, but it hasn't gotten to the level yet where the app tells me, look, your battery is a little bit low. Tomorrow is Thursday, so you probably want to go to the office. And there isn't that much sunshine today, so maybe actually we shouldn't charge on excess production. Maybe we should just charge from the grid, and it's going to cost you this and this. Should we do that? Like, the apps are not at that level yet, and I think they should be, and I think they will be, but they also need to be the same for the pool and for the heat pump. And we say, okay, what's the stack rack? What's more important? Is it more important to heat the house a little bit more, or to run the AC during the summer, or to heat the pool, or whatever? Like, what's the prioritization here? And the different consumption pieces in the house, the different energy consumers are not talking well enough to each other yet. And that's, I think, something that we are working on, and I think other people are working on as well. Obviously, we can kind of monitor the things individually, and we can kind of get the picture to emerge as a whole, but kind of the perfect solution for the customer, it doesn't exist quite yet. I think it will in the future, and I think that's something that will make this investment even better. And it's something that we can also, and that's something that gives me a lot of hope and a lot of comfort, is that in almost all cases, we can retrofit installations that we've done today, so that the customers don't need to wait for this perfect solution to exist, but they can make kind of decisions sequentially, and then say, okay, and at the end, when it works, we put everything together, and then we make it even much better than what you already had. Because it's already great what you get, and we can make it so much better when we add software to it. And that software obviously makes our life easier, makes our installers' lives, our partners' lives easier, and it makes our customers' lives easier.
Yeah. So the idea would be in the future to have your house full electrified, and that you can control everything with one single app. That's the dream.
That's the dream, and I don't think that dream that's not light years away. I think that's actually reasonably close. And as we have a lot of customers, not just us, but there are a lot of customers around the world. It's not just a Spanish thing that are going down that route. I think we're also not that far away from those apps then taking a lot of decisions autonomously, because they know what's going on, and maybe they give you a heads up that this is what they're doing, but essentially they're not going to ask you for your input every 10 minutes. Because that's something that I think we sometimes forget, is that every one of our customers had physics in high school, and we all learned about watts and volts and ohms and amperes. And except for the people that are working at Sunhero, most of the people were not paying attention during those classes. And it's not that fun to think about them. And what's the difference between a kilowatt hour and a kilowatt peak? And this is like second nature to us, obviously, because it's our business, but we shouldn't expect our customers to understand that. And we don't necessarily want to repeat the physics class because they weren't paying attention the first time. So why do it again? It's not that much fun for anyone. So I think getting these apps to be really autonomous and explaining things in a way that they just are simple to understand, that's really where we need to get.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Like what we see here every day with the clients is that most of them, like, they understand how electricity works, but they don't want to get to the nitty-gritty. They don't want to know what kind of protection you're gonna put. They just want the system to work and not have to think about it. And I think that's one of the keys, to get the system to work by itself.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah, and it's really our job, right? That it's our job to make it work, and it's our job to explain it well enough that they understand and how far they want to understand it. And then we say, okay, and the rest we'll take care of it. And if the customers trust us that we can do that, then then everyone is happy, because frankly for us it's also easier if the customer doesn't get too involved, and we can do the work as well as we know that we can do it.
Yep. Okay. Perfect. Thank you, Chris, for coming and being interviewed by me. This was fun.
Thanks for doing this. It was good. Next time I'm gonna interview you, and you can tell us all about
Let's see.
about the fun stuff that's going on in your world, because you're obviously managing all of these installation complexities and operational things for Sunhero. So no one better to speak to that than you.
No, I mean, on my side, the only thing I say, I do enjoy it. And for me, it's fun to build those things. And yeah.
I remember I took a picture, and we had a summer event, and we had all of our operations team, who frankly most of them are men, and all of our installer, who all of them are men, and it was you and one more person, Maria, who were standing there, and it was just the two of you and like 25 guys standing around you, but they were all listening to you. So I know how much you enjoy doing that, and how well you guys do it. But I think it's that's kind of a part of the whole solution to the customer that the customer often doesn't see as much of. But it is what makes the thing work. Like, this whole thing only works if we can do that well, and if we can find a way to explain it well to the customer. And the customer obviously has their sales contact.
Exactly.
But whose job it is to explain all this complexity, but the complexity lies in your team.
Yeah, I think that the objective for my team is make things seem easy.
Yes.
The more easy they seem for the customer, then that means that we're doing a great job, right? If the customer starts to see little small things that are not going according to plan, then that's a bad thing.
That's less fun. Yeah, make it look easy.
Yeah, exactly.
Just make it look easy.
Yeah, exactly. Make it look like you can go to IKEA and buy it and install yourself. You can't. We'll do for you.
Don't do that yourself.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
Thank you. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. We are you can find us at YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and please subscribe, don't forget, and I see you next time. Thank you.